This question actually was from Samuel. I'm not trying to call you out, Samuel, so you don't have to comment on it if you don't want to. But he was asking about if you're reading your tri-type description, you know your tri-type, that fits, you know your instinct, that fits, but then the combination together doesn't seem to fit.
Yeah, I wish that I'd written all these things instead of just knowing them. If you want to, Samuel, tell people your instinctual stacking and your tri-type.
Sure. So my tri-type is 641. My instinctual stacking, sexual, then social, then self-pres. Now, but the thing is, for me, the sexual instinct does not really seem to go along with any of the types in the tri-type. And I would say for the 6, I'm most social, probably self-pres for the 4 and self-pres for the 1.
You hit on something so important. I projected, imagine that in a perfect universe that you would have just that. You would have all 3 instincts and a different instinct attached to each type in your tri-type. It was elegant, it was meaningful, wonderful patterns emerged, but with the research, the instinct was so dominant that you have to look at the stacking a little differently. But what you've hit upon that's key is that we tend to be more one instinct in that. So if we do it the way you stacked it, it actually would be sexual 6, social 4, and self-pres 1, which is what you experienced, right?
I would say for me, self-pres goes with both the 4 and the 1.
But now choose one, if you had to choose.
If I were to have a different instinct for each type?
No, because you've hit on something important, and that is the 1 is very anxious, self-pres 1. Mm-hmm. Social 1 and sexual 1 are not anxious in the same way. But the 1 and 6, self-pres 6 and self-pres 1 are the 2 most anxious types. And then your tri-type is very hard on yourself. The 1-4-6 tri-type, no matter what order you have it in, brutally hard on yourself and critical and trying to improve regardless of which type leads. But yeah, I would look at type 4 more. And what instinct of 4 do you think is dominant?
The type 4, I would say probably the self-pres 4 from what you've said about it.
Okay, now that means your 1 would be social.
Yeah, that works, sure.
Okay, so because you lead with 6, it would be sexual 6, the self-pres 4, and the social 1. So you would have, putting that together, the need for strength and beauty of the sexual 6, the need to endure and self-contain, hold back yourself, which is the 4, self-pres 4, and you would need others, yourself and others, to continue to improve. That it wouldn't be enough you'd speak out to others if you were an extrovert, which you're not, but in your case as an introvert, you probably think it and you don't always say it. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm not critical in terms of the way I talk about other people. I tend to see the positive side in other people, even if I disagree with them. If there's nothing I can do to change a situation, I'll choose to think that people are doing what they think is right, unless I see an opportunity to step in and change something. But no, I'm not critical toward other people.
And how about when you were a little kid? And by critical, I mean you would feel threatened in some way.
Oh,
that person's too confident, or to something?
Yeah, when I was a kid, it was very important I wanted to make sure that I was in line with what my parents thought was correct. And I myself may have agreed or disagreed on some things, and I may have expressed the fact that I agreed or disagreed. I was not outwardly submissive in nature, but it was nevertheless very important to feel as if I was in compliance, whether or not I was acting like it.
How good were you at hiding doing things that weren't in compliance?
I never did. I never did anything really sneaky. I was not the type that woke up scheming ways to get around the rules. I didn't do that.
Most people don't. It's in the moment when
Right.
they're denied something and they want to get around it. Share your Myers-Briggs type for people too, because it'll take the shape of that.
I am not really sure about the Myers-Briggs type. When I took the test, I came out INTJ.
Okay. And if you are the INTJ, it would explain another dimension of all of this. It would explain your identification with one and the introversion of the INTJ, but your focus on being good or not being caught or thinking positively about people is not usually one. One immediately thinks what people aren't doing that they should be doing. Then they might go to, yeah, they probably think they're doing what's right. And that's something we learn with maturity. And it also depends on what our parents did. So I can't take out the imprinting of the parenting. Like, I had a 4 mother and an 8 father, and their parenting was, like, be an individual, forget about complying. And then I had a tritype that was non-conforming. I tried to be cooperative, but I was seen by managers, especially if they happen to have the 1-3-6 tritype, as not following the rules. And I go, I'm putting myself in a pretzel. What do you mean? I don't want to do that way. I'm doing it for you. And I'm doing this and this and this and this and this. But compared to what they would do, it wasn't as much. So it's also who we're up against, what our parents were, the messages they give us, and they teach us the values of their type, their tritype, and their instinctual stacking. So if you happen to have a parent that was a strong social instinct, then you're taught you need to engage with others. And if they were parent happened to be an ENFP, social ENFP, they're saying, oh, it'd be fun, it'd be interesting, it doesn't matter, just talk to people. An extroverted, I should say, really extroverted ENTP. And you don't have to be serious, you can if you want, you can be diverse. That's the message from that parent. And then whatever their Enneagram type is. So we're all a product of that. So the most important thing that you did, Samuel, is you gave a lot of explanation. And that's the 6, so that's why you have your type correct. But even though you could see the other influences, then it was hard for you to choose them. So the rules are often social or self-present, not sexual. Because the sexual is the change work element, like doing the new thing, going against. So in our type, self-pres is holding on. Social is needing others and interfacing with society. And sexual is, hey, this needs to be changed. So they're the change element, whatever type they have. So the secondary pattern that you've addressed, where you have a different type, I do use in an advanced way. You're onto it. And you have to look at your stacking, your instinctual stacking, and your Myers-Briggs, and then see how they would influence one another. And again, what would be canceled out and what would be amplified. So if you are an INTJ, you're less likely to voice what you're thinking, unless it's something that is, if you had a type or a tri-type that, like if you led with 5, you might voice it anyhow because it would bother you that people were inaccurate. But overall, comparatively speaking, compared to the other Myers-Briggs types, the INTJ is less likely to express what they know. They'll just either think people are idiots or be more reserved or just think it in their mind or hold back. But the explanations are 6, but we have to look at how you know you're safe with others, because the social instinct is in there. So you have to look back and, okay, you didn't want to break the rules. You wanted your parents to see you as what? What word would you use? You said in compliance, but what kind of person would you be if you were in compliance?
Yeah, I think the most important for me, both with regards to my parents and other authorities, is to be seen as responsible.
Yeah, that's 6 and 1. So you really have your tri-types right. And then how about with the peer group, which isn't an authority? I mean, you can make people authorities in your peer group, but overall, other kids, when you were a little kid trying to comply.
With the peer group, I want to be seen as a unique type of person. Not ostentatious, but to have something that is noteworthy.
And what would be noteworthy? Like, what do you remember doing as a child to be noteworthy?
Well, I tended to have a very mature, professional way of talking and speaking, especially as I got into my preteen, early teenage years. I was often seen as being very mature for my age. And in a way, I wanted to be seen that way. Not pretentious, but just very, very professional in the way I projected myself.
And why? What was the crazy idea, the reason why?
I think it was really, I guess I felt like that was a safe way to be different, because I don't want to turn people off. I don't want to do something that looks crazy or that looks like I'm showing off, but I just wanted something that makes me a little different, but in an appropriate way. And I thought that was the safest persona to do that.
And was composing music and playing the piano one of those ways that you could be honored by having something that was unique?
Definitely, yes.
And at what age did you start playing the piano and people knowing about it?
I started playing when I was 9 years old. And then at the time, I was homeschooled, so I wasn't really around a lot of other kids. But then
that's another factor. Was your parent, and particularly your mother, the person doing the homeschooling, or were there different mothers and you were part of a co-op?
Yeah, it was my parents, yeah.
Yeah, and both parents doing the homeschooling? The reason it's important is you take on more of the values of your parents and you're less influenced by what other kids are doing. Even if you met up with other kids, like how often did you meet up with other kids when you're homeschooled? Because if you're schooled in the general population, you're exposed to at least 30 kids in a class, and let's say there's several that are your age group, then maybe it's 90 kids if there are 3 fifth grade classes or whatever. How long were you homeschooled? To what age?
I was homeschooled full-time until middle school, and then half of my classes continued to be homeschool up through high school when I graduated. So, and during the time I was full-time homeschooled, I did get together with groups of other homeschoolers once a week. But talking about, my parents and picking up traits of the parents when you're homeschooled,
Values, not
values.
necessarily traits, values.
Right, values. Yeah, both of my parents are very strongly self-pres. And I have wondered if is perhaps growing up in that kind of environment what's led to some confusion about my instinct, because I've wondered about that.
Well, yeah, and you're self-pres sexual, really close, but your parents were the strong pattern, where one is very strong and then the others were lower. You could seem not self-pres, comparatively speaking. But with the sexual, it's a little harder. You don't get the opportunity unless you got together with the other homeschoolers to find your someone. And the sexual subtype, wherever they are, must have their someone. Like I'm in a family where there are no other sexuals. Even in the extended family, I'm the only sexual. So I didn't ever get that true feeling of that union fusion experience until it was with other kids. And then I'd find another sexual subtype and I'd go, wow, this just like we're thinking about the same things. We're talking about the same thing. We may have a different opinion. So you would have noticed how you compared to the other kids because your tritype is very likely to compare and contrast naturally. So don't worry about the answer. Just consider that it could be self-pres sexual, really, really close. And just notice what your own defense strategy does under stress versus what your parents' defense strategies do under stress in terms of like survival. And if there's something askew with the fundamentals of life.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you. That helps a lot. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I actually have found that particular pattern when they're just neck and neck it's really hard if you have 4 in the tritype to see that you might be leading with self-pres, because we gave a lot of the sexual subtype issues to type 4. And the difference being that the intense longing is more sexual, but we put it in 4 as well. Now, how did that happen? That happened because when the Enneagram was introduced, those that learned in Berkeley and via Kathy Spieth, so Naranjo's training, and then Kathy Spieth, who was the girlfriend of Naranjo, and the Berkeley area all got both the types and the instincts, at least the instincts in a minor way, enough to know there were differences. But Naranjo gave permission to Robert Oakes, who was in his first study group in 1971, to experiment with the Enneagram at Loyola University in Chicago. So he started teaching people, but he did not teach the instincts. So there was a whole group of people that knew the Enneagram, in fact, a much larger amount that did not know the instincts. Now, why is this meaningful? Because if you had someone that was sensitive and emotional, they were put into 4. And then when 4 was described, it was talked about as being needing connection. And the word connection has to be qualified in a more specific way as to what someone means by connection. All of us want a connection to something. But what is it we have to have where we have this preoccupation and we feel anxiety or discomfort even if we don't know we have anxiety? Like I've learned for me, it's like my gut just gets viscerally tight, or my shoulders, and I just think, God, why am I so tight? And then I go, oh, I was hurt by something, or I'm feeling unsafe. But I never use the word unsafe, never use the word fear. The only time I ever used the word fear was I'd say, yeah. Someone would say, well, what are you afraid of? You don't seem afraid of anything. And I'd say idiots, incompetence. But that's not really true. But my defense strategy says, oh, you can't be afraid of anything. But that doesn't mean that 8s aren't afraid. So in the case of the self-pres, there is fear, there's trepidation, there's a little bit of angst, a little bit of a moment of, and it's a full body experience. Whereas sexual, it's being out of attunement, even just an eyelash out of attunement. You think, oh, it's not the same. We're not connected in the same way anymore. And then you see the person again and you have that close, deep journey to something really meaningful. And then you say, oh, I guess we are. But then they say something that's a little off. You're not perfectly attuned. And it's like, oh, it's tracking. It's like, what do you track? So with the instincts, it's that, you know, what are you tracking on a primitive level that you're not even aware of? Whereas with the centers, the heart types know the role they have to play. Whereas the subtypes, no, they're primitive forms of the 3 centers. Now, how did that come to be? It's really important to understand the origin of the instincts. Naranjo was teaching Ichazo's instincts that became the centers, but it started out as instincts. He called them instincts. 8, 9, and 1 was a certain instinct. 2, 3, 4 were an instinct. 5, 6, and 7 were an instinct. But then Naranjo needed this subdivision, a variation, a way to explain those differences. So he took the same 3 instincts as a primitive version as the 3 subtypes of the type. So it's still the same. The errors came into play when people like reworded it or explained it differently. They weren't looking anymore at the raw pattern that Naranjo was using. And then they gave further descriptions of the instincts that actually weren't quite true for a lot of the instincts. It was all happened by accident. It was everybody trying to figure out what wasn't taught. And then, as I said, Ichazo felt the same thing. There were these divisions. He just called them trifixes, but it was the same dilemma. And I just use it all because I find all of it meaningful. And that they were both onto something really that you could track and see in other people if you understood it. But it's going back to the fundamental way of being. So some types like 8s just, oh yeah, I'm sub-pres. I'm gonna be comfortable. I'm gonna do what I want when I want it. Yeah. But when you study it, the sexual 8 will, oh God, I hate to admit it, but I think I'm sexual. I just don't show anybody. But actually we do. And it'll be in our talk style. So I encourage everybody to listen to the words you use, the phrases you use, and then the constant patterns of what you're talking about, and you will see your types. You will see your instincts most of all. Like, what kind of movies do you like to watch? What do you like in the vocabulary of the movies? What's the energy like in the movies? What's going on? Where's the thrills, so to speak, or the enjoyment factor? And it's really different based on the instincts. And that's a whole nother discussion, doing the lexicon of the types. I encourage everyone to do that. Anyone want to say anything else on this area, or I'll move on to the next question. Thank you so much, Samuel. Because he's either the exception to the rule, which I'm always open to, or, in other words, a different type of sexual with a slightly different pattern, and I need to learn it. I need to learn those nuances, or it's just slightly more self-pres. And 6s are the social point on the Enneagram, the center of the social types, social and antisocial types. So it gets complicated, especially if you're the INTJ. It gets really complicated. Okay, thank you.